So we are reading Water, You're Not Sick, You're Thirsty by Dr. Batman Gileach. We're on chapter 7, page number 75 of the PDF.
Blood pressure and dehydration. The measurable force that rushes blood through the arterial system of the body is called blood pressure. This force has two components. The diastolic component is the constant basic force in the arteries that keeps the blood vessels full and under a constant basic pressure. It is the lowest reading on the measuring instruments. The normally accepted figure for this reading is between 60 and 90. The systolic component of blood pressure is the sharp rise in force inside the arteries produced by the contraction of the left side of the heart when it forces the volume of blood in its ventricle into an already filled and under pressure arterial system. The normal range is between 90 and 130. In other words, the accepted normal blood pressure systolic over diastolic is from 90 over 60 to 130 over 90. The difference in the two readings is significant. It means that the blood is being stirred by the rush of new blood in the arteries, which prevents blood's heavier constituents from sedimenting in the stagnant areas. It means an added pressure that will squirt some clear serum through the tiny holes in the capillaries and into the infiltration areas in the kidneys for cleansing of the blood.
So filtration areas in the kidney.
The significance of the diastolic pressure is in its effect of filling all the blood vessels of the body, so none remains empty.
So again, this is like a pressure system, right? So in our toilets, we have the pressure pump. What does the pressure pump do? It puts pressure on the water so that when you open the tap, the water gushes out at a higher speed. So there's a stable field where suppose you're not using the pressure pump, it is the pressure that is created by gravity, let's say. So that's that constant pressure which is there. And then when you switch on the pressure pump, the water gushes more. So that's like when the heart is contracting and pushing the blood into the system, right? So there has to be a difference between the basic pressure and the higher pressure. And that's what makes the blood start to move. Okay, if there was only one constant pressure, then the blood won't be flowing and moving in the body system.
The problem of blood circulation becomes apparent if the diastolic pressure rises well above or falls well below the normal range. If it rises above the range, it means the heart has much more pressure to work against when forcing blood into the circulation.
So what does it mean? If the pressure is already high, then the blood has to apply more force to raise the pressure even more. Otherwise, it will not create the blood flow that is required in the system.
For a short period of time, it is not a big deal. But given 60 to 80 beats a minute, day in and day out, you will have one very tired heart, as well as overshocked blood vessels that have to become thick and inelastic to withstand the repeated onslaught. Diastolic pressure well below normal affects circulation, especially to the brain. Not enough pressure in the arteries that go to the brain means less oxygen reaching the vital brain centers. The result, feeling faint and not fully focused. With low blood pressure, you can actually faint if you stand up suddenly. How do these complications arise? Dehydration.
So again, if there's not enough hydration in the body, the blood is not flowing properly. It's not full. The red blood cells are not pumped up, right? They're not puffed up. So the volumetric amount of blood starts to go down, which creates low blood pressure, which does not allow the blood to go into the small capillaries and into the brain, which causes problems, and you could faint because of that.
High blood pressure. Roughly 60 million Americans suffer from hypertension or high blood pressure. There may be more than one reason when blood pressure readings register an increase from what is considered normal. In my scientific opinion, the most common and frequent reason is a gradually establishing dehydration in the body. This type of hypertension is labeled essential hypertension. A large number of people in this group receive some form of medication to deal with this dehydration signal of the body. Until they learn about the relationship of this condition to their insufficient water intake or a wrong choice of fluid intake, they will have to continue taking pharmaceutical products for the rest of their shortened lives.
So again, this is what is said, right? That once you start taking blood pressure medicine, you cannot stop it, right? So the idea is that it can be overcome if we have adequate water, right? So take care of the dehydration and it can take care of the high blood pressure.
The paradigm shift offers us a new perspective on high blood pressure, the form we call essential hypertension. It tells us that a gradual rise in blood pressure is an indicator of a gradually establishing shortage of water in the body. The blood vessels of the body have been designed to cope with repeated fluctuations in their blood volume and the circulation requirements of the new tissues they supply. They have tiny holes or lumen that open and close to adapt to the amount of blood inside them. In water loss from the body, rather lack of sufficient water intake, 66% of the deficit is reflected in the volume of water held in some cells of the body. Plum-like cells begin to become prune-like. 26% is reflected in the fluid environment outside the cells, and only 8% of the deficit is imposed on the volume held in blood circulation. The circulatory system adapts to its 8% loss by shrinking in capacity. Initially, peripheral capillaries close down, and eventually the larger vessels tighten their walls to keep the blood vessels full.
So again, if the volume of the blood starts to fall, naturally the blood will not be supplied everywhere. So supply to certain capillaries in the body, they start to drop. So one of the reasons is like, when you start feeling very cold or you start feeling numb in your peripheries, mainly fingertips and toes, etc. This is a cause of dehydration.
The role of capillary bed in hypertension. Water loss in chronic dehydration. 66% is lost from water held in some cells. 26% is taken from water volume held outside the cells.
So that's the fascia, etc.
8% is taken from water held in the vascular bed. Blood vessels close lumen to compensate for their water loss. Lumen closing causes the rise in tension we recognize as hypertension.
So again, so the body has to adapt to the loss in the volumetric, the volume of blood that is available. So the veins tighten and the capillaries lose the ability to get the blood flowing in them.
The vascular system all over the body adapts to blood volume loss by selective closing of the lumen. One major cause for blood volume loss is the loss of body water or its undersupply through the loss of thirst sensation. This tightening leads to a measurable rise in tension in the arteries. This is called hypertension. If the blood vessels did not tighten on the void, gases would separate from the blood and fill the space, causing gas locks.
So what does this imply, right? There is gas in the blood. So the blood is constantly going to the lungs and taking oxygen, and it is collecting carbon dioxide from the rest of the body and bringing it back to the lungs. So there's a lot of gases in the blood. Now, if the pressure is not maintained, If the pressure is released, then the gas will not be in the blood, it will start moving out. And then that will cause blocks in the body where the gas will get trapped. So no blood will flow. It will act like a bubble, right? It will act like a bubble in the vein and it will block the passage of the veins and the arteries. The blood will not flow anymore if the gas creates a bubble inside the blood vessels. And that's actually very dangerous also, because if that thing goes into the heart, then it can block the valves in the heart, and then that can cause death.
This vascular adaptation to the amount of water the vascular system carries is a most advanced design within the principle of hydraulics that the blood circulation of the body is modeled on.
So again, the blood flow in the body is totally based on hydraulic systems, which is based on pressure.
Injection pressure for the filter systems. Another major reason for the tightening of the vessels is the need to squeeze the blood volume in the arterial system so that water can be filtered and injected into some vitally important cells in the body, such as the brain cells. The tightening of the blood vessel walls provides the force necessary to operate a reverse osmosis system in the human body, a crisis management program to keep important cells alive.
So what does this mean, right? There has to be a pressure created outside the cell for the water to be able to go into the cell, right? If the pressure outside is not enough, then the water will not go into the cell.
Water is pushed into the selected cells of the body through tiny shower heads, cluster perforations in the cell membrane.
So this is something that we read in the previous chapter, in this chapter only, vasopressin, right? The chemical connects into a valve in the skin of the cell, and then that causes the shower head to form, which allows the water to go into the cell.
Difference between the two readings of blood pressure is the range of force needed to deliver water under normal circumstances into some vital cells of the body. As the body becomes more and more dehydrated, the amount of pressure needed to filter and inject water into vital cells increases. The less water there is in the body, the more pressure is needed to hydrate vital cells.
So naturally, if there's less volume, more pressure will be required to pump the water up, right? So for example, in a building, you have a pressure pump system. Now, if there's no water in the tank, then you need more pressure. You need to create more artificial pressure to push the water into the taps. If there is adequate water supply, then automatically due to gravity and other pressure, all the pipes remain full, right? Many times when you open a tap, you'll find air is coming out. What is that? Those are the gas bubbles which have formed and not allowing the water to come. So if the gas bubble gets locked somewhere, the water will not come out through your tap. The same thing happens in the body also.
The mechanism is simple. When confronting stressful circumstances and in dehydration that is becoming gradually established, histamine is released. Histamine activates the production of vasopressin, an antidiuretic hormone. Certain cells of the body have receiving points that are sensitive to vasopressin. As soon as the hormone sits on the sensitive point, a hollow shower head type of opening with minute holes in its base is created in the cell membrane. Serum fills the space and its water content filters through the holes, which are large enough for the passage of only one water molecule at a time. Vasopressin, as its name implies, also produces the tightening of the vessels around it. This tightening of vessels translates into a squeeze that pushes the serum and its water through the holes in the blood vessel, a necessary act if some of this water is to be pushed back into the cells.
So again, naturally, that shower head is created and then the water is pushed through that shower head into the cells. Now, if there's less water around, the pressure required is more. That's why you get hypertension.
Renin-angiotensin system. Another water regulatory system that is associated with dehydration and histamine production is the brain's renin-angiotensin RA system. RA production is a component of the thirst sensation and increased water intake. It also produces some tightening of the blood vessels and has been recognized as a dominant factor in the production of hypertension. The RA system eventually becomes prominent in the kidneys, which have to concentrate urine and save water while producing urine. The kidneys recognize water shortage and activate their resident RA system so that more water is called in for urine production. The RA system eventually stimulates a drive for salt intake and its retention until the body is fully hydrated. The brain has an independent RA system of its own. When there is a water shortage, the center that sense this shortage become active and produce the neurotransmitter histamine, which will then activate the brain's RA system.
So whenever there's a shortage of water, histamine gets produced, which is the hormone which acts in the body systems to retain or to reduce the loss of water.
The schematic model of a nerve cell, its membrane wall, and the vasopressin receptor that becomes transformed into a type of shower head that lets only water through its small perforations. This is part of the mechanism of reverse osmosis that the body employs to deliver filtered water into vital cells.
So again, the water is pushed through the shower heads into the cellular system.
There is a simultaneous rise in blood pressure when the body is dehydrated inside its cells. The tendency is to begin to retain salt, which is essential for the operation of the reverse osmosis process. The body collects water in the form of edema fluid, from which free water is filtered and then injected into vital cells.
So this is one of the major causes of water retention, right? Because when there's inadequate water in the body system, the body wants to retain the water and it has to store it somewhere. So that's why the bloating or the water retention starts. You press the legs, and the hand will go in. The water retention actually starts because of dehydration. So as you increase the water supply, you'll find that water retention will go away. Water retention will go away. Okay, so it's very important that so again, salt also affects the water retention. So as we discussed previously, if you put a little bit of salt on your water on your tongue after you drink the water, the body retains the water much better, and the use of the water definitely improves.
We in medicine have not recognized the relationship of dehydration inside the cells of the body to the physiological role of RA system. We have only recognized the expansion of water volume in the environment outside the cells. We automatically assume that the retention of fluid in the body and the rise in blood pressure are pathological processes caused by the RA system. We have not realized that the process is an adaptive measure to correct dehydration inside the vital cells of the body, such as the brain cells, the liver cells, the kidney cells, the lungs, and other important organs and glands.
So again, when water retention is there, it's outside the cells, right? It is not inside the cells. But the dehydration is actually taking place inside the cells. So that is why it is important that we also have a little bit of salt so that the vasopressin system starts to get into operation, so that the water which is collected outside the cells starts getting pushed into the cells, removing the dehydrations inside the cells.
The chemical steps involve angiotensin converting enzymes, ACE, in 3 steps. These enzymes produce angiotensin 3. This chemical forces a strict drive for retention of salt in the body. Extra salt will retain extra water in the tissues.
So salt helps us to retain the water in the tissue.
The only things that turn off this salt retaining drive mechanism are adequate water intake and some salt intake that balance the fluid content inside and outside the cells. The salt should be unrefined sea salt that contains other vital minerals that are needed to hold on to the water once it is injected or diffused inside the cells.
So again, processed salt do not have the trace elements. There's some, I think 38 or 43 trace minerals, which are very important. They act like catalysts inside the body. So when you look at sea salt or you look at rock salt, there are trace minerals which are there, which are very important for the body's functioning. If those trace minerals are not there, then the catalyst is not there for various functions of the body to take over. So that's why processed salt may not be a good idea. Normal sea salt or rock salt, what we call Sindha Namak or Himalayan salt, is a better thing to have. So unprocessed sea salt.
When it is freely available, water diffuses quite rapidly through the cell membranes without needing to be forced. Its rate of diffusion through the cell membrane has been calculated to be 10 is to the power minus 3 centimeters per second, which is fairly fast. This natural and fast diffusion process of water in the kidneys is the reason why water itself is a natural diuretic.
So
Far
water is a
better
sorry, yeah.
far better than chemical diuretics or ACE inhibitors now used routinely.
So again,
In fact,
if you increase your water intake, then automatically the water gets processed because the water pressure inside the system is higher, and it allows the flushing of the system to take place. So one of the things is that if you are having less water, you're having water retention, then the most important thing is actually to increase your water intake rather than decrease it. Because as you increase the intake of water, automatically the deliric, I mean, you will start to urinate, you will start to sweat, you'll allow the water to get out of your system.
in fact, to give a person with essential hypertension diuretics is, in my opinion, a blatant disservice to the patient. Water itself will increase urine production and excess retained salt will gradually be passed in the urine.
So again, as we urinate, if there is excess salt, it will automatically get drained out. So there is nothing like you can take too much of salt.
This is why water is a most effective decongestant and edema remover. When you drink water to dilute the blood, it will not be necessary to rely entirely on the process of reverse osmosis and the RA system to force water into vital cells, including the renal tissue that has to make concentrated urine and force the toxic waste out of the body. The body will not cause a collection of extra fluid in the tissues as a reservoir to filter and inject water into its vital cells as an emergency process. This is what essential hypertension is all about.
Okay, so hypertension is produced because we need to increase the pressure in the system because the pressure is dropping. There is not enough water to keep the pressure up.
Because it is associated with aging and seemed unavoidable in the past, The gradual rise in blood pressure has been labeled essential hypertension, meaning it is an unavoidable outcome of living to a mature life. It was not recognized that a gradual loss of thirst perception as we grow older is responsible for the onset of chronic dehydration and subsequent hypertension.
So again, dehydration causes hypertension and other issues in the body.
A model of physiological events that will either stimulate or inhibit renin-angiotensin production. So blood volume falls, blood pressure falls, sodium depletion happens, and renin activation promotes angiotensin production. So there's water intake, inhibit renin-angiotensin activity after normal levels are reached.
Okay, so basically, if enough water is there, then blood pressure will not fall, blood volume will not fall, and the salt will also not get depleted.
Naturally, an increase in daily water intake and sea salt that contains other minerals will correct this problem. The present way of dealing with hypertension is criminal. To give diuretics to a hypertensive who has adequate kidney function is absurd. The body is trying to retain its water by storing salt, and we say to the design of nature in us, no, you do not understand. You must take diuretics and get rid of water. By giving diuretics and reducing the water content of the body, we reduce the efficiency of the reverse osmosis system that is delivering water to the brain and other important cells in the body. Water by itself is the best natural diuretic. It should be remembered that complications associated with hypertension, including coronary thrombosis and repeated strokes, are in effect caused by persistent dehydration. Remember, chronic dehydration kills prematurely and painfully. The use of diuretics assists in the process. Truck driver Jim Bolan, whose letter follows, is an extremely interesting person. He was trained as a pilot and worked with one of the airlines. Because of the very high blood pressure, he was grounded, unable to fly any longer. This is when he discovered the water cure and was able to lower his blood pressure with ease and without any of the usual chemicals that are prescribed for this condition. By nature, he is very inquisitive and curious to learn. He has a sharp memory for detail. He has taken to heart the information on the role of water and its curative properties and is determined to enlighten and help others.
So the water cure is basically how to drink water. It's another book.
Bolan is now a traveling missionary for the water cure. He drives a truck the length and breadth of the country. He talks to other drivers at truck stops or through their system of road radio communication. He gets them to drink water when they are tired and feel sleepy at the wheel. He gets them to give up their caffeine-containing coffee and sodas and drink water instead. He tells them about the importance of adequate salt intake in proportion to the amount of water they need. Every month, he buys several $100s worth of books and tapes and gives them to the people who need the information to improve their health. He stops at churches and parishes on his way. He talks to priests on his delivery routes and gives them books and videotapes to share with their parishioners. He has helped thousands of people learn about the importance of water in their lives.
So again, giving out this information, telling people about this process, right, becomes important because most people do not know about what we are talking about over here.
To Dr. Jim Bolan. I discovered the importance of water and salt to the human body in June of 1997 when I failed a medical for renewing my commercial flying license. My pressure at rest was 230 by 110. I was grounded and told to see my personal physician. He told me I needed blood pressure medication, but I decided I was not going on any medication yet. I left upset, in denial. My blood pressure had always been 120 by 80. I got a second opinion weeks later after trying garlic, herbs, vitamins, exercise, meditation, and found it's still a solid 180 by 100. He told me if I didn't go on medication, my heart would enlarge and I would have a heart attack or stroke down the road. I went home depressed. I did not want to accept old age at 54. I was telling a friend about my situation when a retired chiropractor told me about your book, Your Body's Many Cries for Water. He loaned me his new book and told me to stop all caffeine for a week, drink 10 glasses of water, and add 2 teaspoons of salt to my diet. I looked at him like he was crazy.
Half a teaspoon of salt.
Oh, sorry. And add half a teaspoon of salt to my diet. I looked at him like he was crazy. I had been on a salt-free diet for years. Thank God for your book, Dr. Batman Galich, and Dr. Lee Hobson for his time and generosity. My blood pressure is now 117 by 75. I'm taking no medication at all, and I have unlimited energy at 58 years old. No more headache or lower back pain, sinuses are clear, and no constipation. Thankfully, Jim Bolan, Indio, California.
So again, it can help in monitoring your blood pressure very, very systematically.
I could write much more about blood pressure. Suffice it to say, essential hypotension is an indicator of an establishing chronic dehydration. Correct the established dehydration in your body with an adjustment to daily water intake and adequate intake of minerals to replace those lost through increased urination, and the adaptive need to raise the blood pressure from its normal levels will not arise. It is as simple as that. Dehydration is by far the most frequent constant stressor in the human body that raises blood pressure in at least 60 million Americans. However, there may arise occasions when other silent stressors may bring about the same chemical driving forces that ultimately raise blood pressure. These occasions are few and far between and need exhaustive investigation to pinpoint the problem. We need to exclude dehydration as the primary cause of the rise in blood pressure first before embarking on other approaches.
So again, because we are urinating more, we will tend to lose the minerals in the body. So it becomes important to replenish the minerals. That is why also bigger salt intake, and especially not just the normal manufactured salt, it will be sea salt, because many of these minerals are there in the sea salt itself, or rock salt, right? There's a book by Tom something. It's called The Secret Life of Soil. In that, he actually says that you, in the area that you live, the indigenous rocks which are there, you should actually crush them and have a teaspoon of that rock mineral, crushed rock, every month, once a month, to put the minerals which are required in your body, because they are available in the rock. So he actually recommends crushing the rocks in a
Salt and hypertension. Recent articles in scientific journals are also questioning the view that salt is bad for those with hypertension. Dr. H. Alderman of Albert Einstein College of Medicine and Associates, in their 1995 article in the Journal of Hypertension, have shown that people on restrictively low salt diets are more likely to die from heart attacks or strokes than those who use salt liberally. In a 1997 article in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, Dr. David Makaran of Department of Nephrology at Oregon Health Science University, Portland, found that with adequate daily intake of potassium, calcium, and magnesium, not only will salt not raise blood pressure, it might actually lower it.
So again, these are all trace minerals: potassium, calcium, magnesium, zinc. It is all required in our body system, along with salt, to maintain the homeostasis in our body system.
This article confirms my view that the water volume inside and outside the cells of the body needs to be in balance. Remember that salt regulates the water levels outside the cells. Potassium, magnesium, and calcium are the vital minerals that balance the water volume inside the cells.
So again, these trace minerals are required by these cells to function properly.
Additional information you need to remember is that 5 elements: water, salt, potassium, magnesium, and calcium are involved in energy regulation inside the cells.
So production of ATP is the result of water and calcium, right? So that is the storehouse of energy inside the cell. So now if these two or these trace minerals are not there, then the energy storage capacity of the cell starts to get compromised.
Water drives the sodium-potassium pump protein and manufactures hydroelectricity. This hydroelectricity is used for immediate needs, and the excess of it is converted to usable stored energy for emergency use. Calcium is bonded to other calcium in bones and in the endoplasmic reticulum inside the cells. Each bonded calcium atom traps 1 unit of energy that can be reused if necessary. Magnesium traps many units of energy in the form of magnesium ATP.
Okay, so again, ATP is the storehouse of energy inside the cell.
As you can see, the mystery of essential hypertension is solved. To avoid the problem, you need to take an adequate amount of water daily so that the urine is light in color. Your diet should include no less than 3 to 4 grams of salt, about 1 gram of calcium, 400 to 800 milligrams of magnesium. Although this amount of magnesium is more than the official dietary reference values, most people are severely magnesium deficient and need to correct the deficiency, and about 2000 to 4000 milligrams of potassium. It is easy to get the potassium in high potassium foods such as raisins, potatoes, avocados, lima, and all the other beans, peas, tomatoes, cauliflower, bananas, bread, orange, grapefruits, dried apricots, milk, eggs, and cheese. Practically everything you eat has some potassium content. You need to eat foods and fruits with higher potassium content.
So again, bananas also have a lot of potassium content. That's why athletes, they'll have a banana before going in to play a game, or when they come back, they'll again have a banana. It replenishes the potassium in the system.
If you do not eat kelp, wheat bran, wheat germ, almonds, and other nuts that have very high magnesium content, or green leafy vegetables in which magnesium is a component of chlorophyll, you should take magnesium supplements every day. As for calcium, in order of their calcium content, kelp, cheese, sesame seeds, bean curd, molasses, pulses, lentils, different beans, figs, almonds, spring greens, watercress, parsley, plain yogurt, shrimp, broccoli, milk, cottage cheese, and olives will provide the calcium needs of the body. People on weight loss programs or those who do not have access to a balanced diet should take these minerals in the form of supplements.
So again, many times, again, as I mentioned, that the food that we are eating is devoid of these trace minerals. So you need to have them as supplements. Now, when we have them as supplements, there are many times you get chemically created supplements. The body is not able to handle that, right? You need natural supplements, which is created out of natural material, so that your body can handle it and actually use the minerals or the supplements that you are taking in the form of a tablet. Otherwise, there's no point. You have the tablet and it will get flushed out of your system.
Iodine is a very important element for the regulation of the fluid content of the body. Iodine is essential for the thyroid gland to manufacture thyroxine, its primary hormone. It seems that thyroxine is the element that stimulates the cells to manufacture all the pump proteins that regulate the sodium, potassium, and other mineral balances outside and inside the cells, and that generate energy in the process.
So again, it's all interrelated and interconnected. You really can't take out one thing from the other, right? So you have to be clear about what the circuitry is.
Before salt was iodized, many people suffered from iodine deficiency and lumpy
Shangla,
thyroid.
you've missed a paragraph.
Iodine is a very important element for the regulation of the fluid content of the body. Iodine is essential for the thyroid gland to manufacture thyroxine, its primary hormone. It seems that thyroxine is the element that stimulates the cells to manufacture all the pump proteins that regulate the sodium, potassium, and other mineral balances outside and inside the cells, and that generate energy in the process. With the movement of sodium and potassium across the cell membrane, not only will water also move to balance the osmotic pressure in and out of the cell, but the other mineral balance the osmotic pressure in and out of the cell, but the other mineral transferring pumps will take their cue and regulate the magnesium, potassium, and calcium levels of the cell interior as well.
So again, the blood is taking the minerals from the digestive system and other stuff to the cells, but it has to go into the cells. So then that becomes important. That's why again, iodine is very important in our body system. And that's why you have something called iodized salt. Otherwise, grout occurs, right? Circulation gets affected in the body system and growth starts happening in the body system if there is not adequate iodine in the system.
Before salt was iodized, many people suffered from iodine deficiency and lumpy thyroid gland enlargement in their necks, known as thyroid goiter. One of the major complications of iodine deficiency is the collection of hard to move and inelastic swelling and edema, known as myxedema. Other complications are dry skin, loss of hair and memory, tiredness, sleepiness, and loss of muscle tissue. As you can see, iodine is vital for good health and good fluid balance. Much to my regret, I discovered that unrefined sea salt does not have enough iodine. Thinking that sea salt has many important trace elements, I switched to using only sea salt and not diligent in taking foods and multivitamins that would provide my body with the iodine it needs. My second mistake was that being so busy with sharing my medical breakthrough on water metabolism of the body with people that I was not alert to my own health problems. I developed all the early stages of iodine deficiency, but no goiter in my neck. However, I developed an uncomfortable feeling in my chest and also shortness of breath.
So whenever we look at something, we need to look at it holistically. You can't just follow one track and say, no, this is what needs to be done. You have to look at the other factors as well.
A high-resolution CT scan of my chest revealed a massive thyroid goiter in my chest that was pressing on my trachea to the point of deforming it. This was 3 months ago. I adjusted my iodine intake in the form of dried kelp or as part of the composition of the one a day multivitamin that I now take religiously. As a result, my breathing problem has cleared, my edema has cleared. I am no longer lethargic and my energy level has increased. My sleep has normalized. My blood pressure is back to the normal range. I now feel much healthier and more confident and have lost 15 pounds of the swelling that I had amassed. All these improvements have been made possible because of the vital role of simple iodine in the physiology of the body and adjustment to my intake of vital minerals mentioned above. You see, even doctors get sick, and that is how we learn. A word of caution: do not overdo iodine intake. It could cause other problems.
So again, excess of anything becomes a problem.
Diabetes. Diabetes seems to be the end result of water deficiency in the brain, to the point that the brain's neurotransmitter systems, particularly the system that is regulated by the neurotransmitter serotonin, are affected. It is within the automatic design of the brain to peg up the glucose threshold so that it can maintain its own volume and energy requirements when there is a water shortage in the body. The brain has to depend more on glucose as a source of energy. The brain needs more glucose for its energy value and its metabolic conversion to water. Under the urgent circumstances produced by the stress, up to 85% of the supplemental energy requirement by the brain is provided by sugar alone. This is why stressed people resort to eating sweet food. While all the other cells need to be influenced by insulin to take up glucose through their cell walls, the brain does not depend on insulin to carry sugar across its cell membranes.
So the brain can actually use sugar to hydrate itself. But again, that's not the way that we need to do things, right? So the better way is to hydrate ourselves.
It seems to be in the natural design of the brain to steer the physiological mechanisms in the direction of higher glucose level in the body when there is persistent dehydration that would damage the brain more than it could recover from. The brain resuscitates itself in the same way that a doctor resuscitates a patient with intravenous fluid containing sugar and salt. The main problem stems from one very important factor: The salt metabolism, both sodium and potassium, of the body also becomes negatively affected when there is water deficiency in the body. This condition should be treated with an increase in water intake and diet manipulation to provide the necessary minerals and amino acid balance for tissue repair, including brain tissue requirements.
So again, the drip system, right? Whenever someone is low, you put a drip into the person, and that drip basically contains salt and glucose, right? So that it and water. So it pushes water into the system, it hydrates the system, which allows the person to start getting better.
It has been shown that brain amino acid balance for tryptophan is affected in diabetic rats. There seems to be a much lower level of this amino acid in the brain when diabetes exists.
Okay, so now tryptophan is actually used to manufacture many of the other amino acids. So if the production and the availability of tryptophan is affected, it affects the production of the other amino acids.
Tryptophan in turn regulates the salt intake of the body. Salt is responsible for regulating water volume content outside the cells of the body. When there is tryptophan deficiency in the body, there is also a total body salt shortage. With lower salt retention as a result of tryptophan deficiency, the responsibility for holding water in the body and outside the cells falls onto the sugar content in the body. To do its new job and compensate for the lower salt, the sugar content rises. The way this happens is so simple, it is almost unbelievable.
So again, lack of salt will cause sugar content in the blood and the body to start rising. So a balance of salt and sweet intake needs to be maintained.
One of histamine's deputies, which becomes increasingly active in water distribution systems, is prostaglandin E. This chemical inhibits the insulin-making cells in the pancreas, preventing them from making and secreting insulin. When insulin is not adequately secreted, the main body cells do not receive sufficient sugar and some amino acids. Potassium stays outside the cells, and the water that accompanies potassium does not enter the cells either. In this way, the cells of the body are forced to forego their right to water and some amino acids, and they gradually become damaged. This is how diabetes becomes the cause of many associated disease conditions.
So again, so naturally, if adequate insulin is not there, adequate water in the cells will not be there, and it will cause problems. So again, dehydration is the cause of diabetes also.
Diabetes is a good example of next generation damage that is caused by dehydration, whereas the onset of dehydration induced diabetes is normally seen in the elderly and is often reversible. The more structurally serious and irreversible variety of the disease is seen in younger people. The juvenile variety of diabetes needs to be treated carefully before it becomes a totally irreversible type of diabetes and permanent structural damage takes place.
So again, so this means that we need to make sure that the youngsters are drinking enough water, not soft drinks and other stuff.
At the moment, there seems to be a total reliance on the belief that genetic dictation is what promotes the
You
occurrence
missed a
of
paragraph, Shimunda. Basically, the cause.
Basically, the cause is the same in children as in adults. except that in adults there is more reserve in the system. In children, the process of physical growth strains the system much more quickly. Children are constantly dehydrated and the amino acid pool is in a state of constant fluctuation.
So as children are growing, more water is required because otherwise the cells are multiplying, right? As the cells are multiplying, because of that we grow. So that's why more water is required. So children are constantly dehydrated. So it's very important to keep children hydrated.
At the moment, there seems to be total reliance on the belief that genetic dictation is what promotes the occurrence of diabetes, particularly in the young. One important fact to remember is that the DNA structure is held together by proteins that also obey and many dictates of water as their ultimate regulator. Water is the common factor for all protein functions in the body, including the DNA manufacturing system. Accordingly, the associated genetic marker in diabetes may not be a dictating factor for disease production. Rather, it may be the indicator of a deep-rooted dehydration caused damage that has also affected the DNA recording system. A passive
So
outcome.
right. So again, water, we can stop here. Water is very, very important, right? It can affect the DNA that is being produced. And again, as the cells are growing, we need the DNA. We need the active ingredients for growth. So water becomes very, very important.